Hello and welcome to Politics here on France 24. Will the European crisis reopen old wounds? The core of the European Union, the Franco-German couple, is officially working hand in hand to salvage the euro and rescue Europe. Nicolas Sarkozy and Angela Merkel are basically spending the week together in Paris, in Marseille, and finally in Brussels for a crucial EU summit. But some here in France resent the perceived alignment on Germany as a loss of sovereignty and identity. So with me to discuss the odd Franco-German couple against the backdrop of this unprecedented crisis is Thomas Clau, who is the Paris bureau chief of the European Council on Foreign Relations, Gregory Viscusi, a reporter with Bloomberg News, and Marc-Olivier Padis, who is the vice president of the Terra Nova think tank and the editor-in-chief of Esprit magazine. So the tensions over Germany began when one of the leaders of the Socialist Party made some tough remarks about German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and he got a swift response from President Nicolas Sarkozy.
We see the issue of German nationalism rearing its head back again through the Bismarck-style policy of Ms. Merkel. What does it mean? It means that she is preparing a confrontation to impose her domination.
Until now, there was a consensus in the French political class about the Franco-German friendship. Those who uttered these remarks have discredited themselves with our German friends. The left has always believed in the Franco-German friendship, as has the right. I wish that whatever the electoral calendar is, everyone would rise to the occasion and avoid toying with the history of our two countries. A history too tragic to allow such carelessness.
What do you make of this exchange, Thomas Clau? It's rather unusual in France to have some arguments about whether being friend or ally with Germany is a question.
Yes, it is in a sense. It's not unusual for socialists when there is an important party political campaign to criticize the positions of a German conservative government. Lionel Jospin and Dominique Strauss-Kahn did this in 1997 very vigorously when they attacked the German proposal, the European proposal for the Stability Pact, which was essentially drafted in Germany, which then, of course, led to some modification, superficial rather than substantial. But what we've seen coming out of parts of the socialist leadership in the wider sense is, I think, quite unusual. And obviously, the Socialist Party leadership has tried to attack Nicolas Sarkozy somehow for his handling of the Eurozone crisis. And the best line of attack they found is to accuse him to be too submissive in the relationship with Angela Merkel. Now, that, of course, creates a danger of opening a door to nationalist reflexes, which then others, unfortunately, have chosen to walk through with a language which I think is unusual coming from French politicians and which in the state of heightened emotion, which is that of the Eurozone and Europe today, doesn't help.
Greg Viscusi, are some of the socialists trying to bring the issue to Nicolas Sarkozy as a Gaullist? The Gaullists are traditionally proud of France, and are the socialists conveying the message that, well, Nicolas Sarkozy is abandoning France's sovereignty and to the old enemy Germany?
I wouldn't necessarily put it down to Gaullism. Montebourg's a bit of a loudmouth, and he's brash.
He's not the only one.
He's not the only one. But on the other hand, there's Germans who have been saying the same thing. I mean, Helmut Schmidt said things, similar line of things, in a much more elegant way than Montebourg said. But you know, there is criticism within Germany too, and there's some real issues here. I mean, you don't have to be a nutcase to think that this German obsession with austerity in this moment is the wrong way to go in solving the euro crisis. You know, it's not just crazy. It's not just crazy people who think that. So,
but to say it is different.
To say it is different. I think they're probably, instead of getting into the nitty gritty of the economic issues, which I don't know if they think that French people won't understand or they'll be turned off. I don't know why. They're going for this rather cheap shot about Sarkozy being at the command at the orders of the Germans instead. But I wouldn't totally dismiss what they're saying as being totally crazy.
Marc-Olivier Padis, François Hollande is in a difficult position because he is disavowing some of the remarks, but on the other hand, he cannot totally say, oh, Nicolas Sarkozy is right to stick with Angela Merkel as much as he can.
Well, I think that the way he reacted was interesting, was to go to Berlin simply and to meet the Social Democrats there. So, and also one must say that Arnaud Montebourg has hardly any role in François Hollande's campaign. So it wasn't, and that was maybe the problem, that Arnaud Montebourg was quite angry that he was unable to find any role in the campaign today, now that he has lost the primary elections.
Do you think he's just unhappy and he's venting out, or is he conveying a message that's felt maybe by part of the left? They feel that, you know, Nicolas Sarkozy is not doing his utmost to protect French in a time of crisis.
Maybe widely that the French left, I think that there could be a feeling throughout Europe that the French and the Germans working together are getting far beyond what they can do together, because finally they could be deciding things for the 17 of the Eurozone, but also for the 27. And that's really a problem. And in that way, Angela Merkel needs Sarkozy to limit the anti-German feeling throughout Europe, which could be also an anti-French feeling, by the way.
I just want, speaking of anti-German feelings, I just want to rewind back to March of 2007. We were in the thick of the last presidential campaign, and Nicolas Sarkozy had some other thoughts than he has now on Germany. Let's take a listen.
France does not have to be ashamed of its history. France has never committed genocide. France did not invent the final solution.
Thomas Clow.
Sarkozy's come a long way. You know, he was well known when he came into office as not being a huge friend of Germany. Not being particularly close emotionally to German culture. And look, now he's basing sort of an important part of his bid for re-election on saying, I'm going to bring the French model closer to the German one. And, you know, Germany on many issues shows the way. I mean, that's quite an extraordinary change. To go back on what you said, I think, yes, it is absolutely legitimate, I would even say necessary, to criticize the German government's position, because they're really dragging their feet over the crisis. They still do. I don't think they get it. They don't get haven't taken the full measure of what needs to happen. But there is emotion all across Europe. There are anti-German feelings in countries like Greece, Ireland, fueled by the feeling that Germany is dictating, is imposing a solution on the partners as the now economically and politically dominant power within the Eurozone. The trouble is that if you use incendiary language in that context, which summons historical memories, which may look buried, but in fact which aren't, well, first I think that you open the doors to all sorts of undesirable political developments and feelings. You potentially fuel, you might even fuel the vote of the far right by legitimizing their discourse. Also, I don't think you make any positive contribution.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with anything in this
exactly.
case. I mean, the Second World War and Bismarck have nothing to do with this crisis.
Precisely.
And
That said, you know, negative comments came from Germany. I mean, we've had senior German politicians, you know, when the leader of the parliamentary group in the German parliament says, all of Europe is speaking German now, that is a crazy comment to make, very unhelpful, fueling all sorts of
and there's
bad
also been in some of the German press some rather untasteful depictions of Southern Europeans as all being, you know, lazy people who live off the dole and live off the hard work of the pure hard-working North, and it's a bit more complicated than that.
Yeah, no, that's
right. Olivier Pedis, how do you think the socialists here in France will need to handle this issue? I mean, they will have Angela Merkel in power when they arrive. The elections, correct me if I'm wrong, are in 2013. So how do you do this if you start criticizing someone and compare her to Bismarck? I understand it's not the candidate, but nevertheless, if you have a socialist president, a socialist government versus a conservative one in Germany, this could be difficult.
Well, the quotation that you make from Sarkozy shows that anyway, in the French politics, you have then to deal with this French-German relationship. And the words from Sarkozy were really far more violent than the words from Montebourg. And it was longer than the excerpt that you made here. And always when you have a new president elected in France, at least since Mitterrand, in the first time he always tried to see if there is no alternative to this French-German relationship, tries once with England and then the times after with
It was the case with Nicolas Sarkozy, actually.
Yes, for example, on military issues, he has been very far with Great Britain. And
in Libya, for instance.
And probably François Hollande will, in the beginning, if he is elected, he will try to find something else with Italy or I don't know who. And then he will see that he has no other choice than to get back to Germany. And when you have a French left government and a right government in Germany, or the reverse, it can work also quite fine. It's not a problem.
Do you agree, Thomas Klaus? Is your historic record good?
The historic record is good, and the French and the left and the right sometimes work better together than the left and the left. Mitterrand and Kohl was a classic example. Schmidt and Giscard was another one. And what you just said of the French, newly elected French presidents is very true. Newly elected German chancellors. Schröder tried to build a really close rapport with Blair at the time, the whole third way thing. So there is always the tendency, the hope, to get in bed with someone else. But at the end, you find that everyone goes back to their wife or husband, and it's straying doesn't work.
Isn't this, Greg Viscusi, maybe a worry on the part of the left that Nicolas Sarkozy and François Hollande, if he pursues the same line, if he's elected, of austerity, will put France in a kind of financial, economic straitjacket, and that they will not be able to implement so-called progressive policies on the social level? Is this maybe also the fear that...
Yeah, well, they can't anyway, just because the French state is pretty much at the limit of what it can spend and what it can tax, so they're going to have to roll back anyway. But they would have to do it regardless of whether the Germans are issuing diktats, which they're not. But whether they, I think what I'd say is that they're finding a nice, easy excuse that it's all the fault of the Germans, it's all the fault of the EU, to take steps that they're going to have to take anyway. I mean, France is in for a few years of austerity. There's no other way around it, and that would be the case without Angela Merkel or with Angela Merkel.
On the other hand, could this strategy of really sticking to Germany politically, economically, intellectually, that Nicolas Sarkozy has adopted, do you think it can help him? He's progressed in the polls. We can see they're more or less similar. He is still way behind François Hollande, but still this idea of, Germany is the best pupil in the class, so this is the model we have to emulate. Could this work?
I'm not sure, because I'm not sure that really people understand what Sarkozy means by German model, or it could be anyone else. I mean, what's the German model? People see rather that he's trying to work very hard to find a solution, and that's what he wants to show. That he jumps to the planes and get to Berlin and get to Brussels, and what he will say is, okay, I made many failures, but at least I tried to do some things, and my opponent, he has no records, and that's the difference.
Thomas, in Nicolas Sarkozy's recent rhetoric about really, as I said, this German model, I mean, has there been before so much said about the need to copy Germany, especially from, again, someone who's from the Gaullist camp with national pride at the core of the ideology? I mean, does this strike you as really a shift, at least in the rhetoric?
Well, actually, if you go back in French post-war history, rattraper l'Allemagne was a theme, I think, in the late 60s and early 70s, when the catch-up with Germany, when the German economic post-war miracles started happening. There was a growing fascination in France with it, a sort of mixture of fascination, respect, a bit of envy, and a bit of fear that one day Germany might become bigger and stronger. And so it's a recurrent topic, particularly in the French right, to say something is happening there, economic reforms or efficiency, we have to look to that. It comes and it goes, but it's not an entirely new phenomenon. What is interesting is that Sarkozy, who really, he wasn't anti-German, but he felt no proximity to Germany, has chosen, which I think was almost a strategic choice in terms of how he manages his campaign, to put a lot of emphasis on that. And he thinks it'll work out. It might, because there is probably a substantial part of the French electorate that thinks, yes, we need to become, in France, a bit more Germanic in the way we manage our economy. Whether that will actually carry him back into the Élysée is another and very open question.
Go ahead.
I also think that he misunderstands the reason for Germany's recent success. It's not because of their tax system. It's because of a series of very courageous and far-reaching labor market reforms that Schroeder put through. I mean, if you're going to look at why Germany's doing so much better than the rest of Europe now, it's because they spent the last decade with these Hartz reforms, whereas the French did the 35 hours. The Italians wasted a decade obsessing about Berlusconi. And the Irish and the Spanish thought they got rich because of their real estate investments. And, whereas the Germans did these very far-reaching labor reforms. And that's the one thing that Sarkozy does not talk about much. He talks about, getting our corporate taxes on the same line. Well, that's got nothing to do with Germany's success. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll have to see how Nicolas Sarkozy, Angela Merkel, France, Germany fare over the next few weeks. Will be a very interesting topic. You can read about it in the latest edition of L'Esprit magazine, very interesting one. Thank you to all of you, and thank you for watching Politics. We'll see you next week here on France 24.